Ever felt like certain old Hollywood stars never quite got the standing ovation they deserved? Like hidden gems overshadowed by more marketable names? Get ready, because today we're spotlighting 10 underappreciated actors whose remarkable gifts never fully echoed through the halls of Tinseltown. Stick around. By the time we're done, you might find yourself hunting down these folks' filmographies, eager to see what the hype is all about. Number 1, Kay Francis. Kay Francis represents a case study in how Hollywood's adulation can be as fleeting as it is intense. In the early 1930s, she basked in fame as Warner Brothers' highest-paid actress. Paparazzi trailed her chic outings, tabloids hailed her as the best-dressed woman in Hollywood, and fans tried mimicking her every fashion choice. Yet mention Kay Francis today, and you'll often be met with blank stares, proof that star power can vanish in a blink. Born Catherine Edwina Gibbs in Oklahoma City, Francis found her way onto Broadway by 1925, seeking roles in small productions until her potent charisma caught the right eyes. When the transition to talkies began rattling the film world, Francis seemed specially equipped to excel. Her refined accent, sultry timbre, and poised bearing gave her a leg up when many silent icons floundered with microphone jitters. Studios scrambled to find their next talkie queen, and Francis's contract swiftly turned into gold. By the early 30s, she was starring in a flurry of melodramas, romantic comedies, and star vehicles designed to capitalize on her glamour. One of her shining moments was Ernst Lubitsch's Trouble in Paradise, 1932. She played Madame Mariette Collet, a wealthy widow entangled in a playful love triangle. In her hands, the character soared beyond static socialite stereotypes. Francis exuded sophistication, her comedic beats perfectly interwoven with a worldly maturity. Critics praised her timing and wit, acknowledging that she refined the comedic style of Hollywood's high society roles. She could be sweet without saccharine, elegant but never distant. For a brief stretch, she essentially ruled Warner Brothers, rivaling big names like Barbara Stanwyck or Joan Crawford. However, the seeds of her decline were planted as swiftly as her success. Studio executives grew frustrated with her demand for better roles. Having soared in the glamorous wife or woman in peril archetypes, Francis felt pigeonholed and lobbied for more complex material. She developed a reputation for being difficult, and that label often sealed an actress's fate in an era ruled by rigid studio hierarchies. By the late 30s, her starring roles waned, overshadowed by younger or more malleable faces. Simultaneously, personal upheavals, marriages, divorces, rumored feuds, shifted the press's interest from her talent to her off-screen dramas. During the 1940s, Francis kept working, but mostly in less prestigious offerings, B-movies, or supporting parts in stage plays. She poured herself into philanthropic efforts, notably entertaining troops during World War II. Yet the star sheen she'd once commanded had largely faded. After stepping away from film, Francis turned reflective. She penned an autobiography that revealed a candid, forthright personality, unafraid to admit her missteps or lament her missed career opportunities. Number 2, Joel McCREA. If Hollywood's golden age was a sprawling tapestry of personalities, Joel McCREA stands out as a sturdy, reassuring thread woven through decades of cinema. His name doesn't ignite the same immediate recognition as Clark Gable or Cary Grant, yet McCREA quietly built a resume that few could rival. He was a jack of all trades, alternating between westerns, screwball comedies, and thrillers with an ease that belied the deeper craft beneath. Born in South Pasadena, McCREA initially leaned towards stunt work in his early years, possibly due to his athletic build and the sheer grit he displayed on set. This hustle gave him first-hand insight into filmmaking's raw mechanics, forging an unpretentious approach that resonated with directors. Instead of fussing about star treatment, he'd slip on a cowboy hat or comedic attire, game for whatever the role demanded. His big breakthrough came with Preston Sturges's Sullivan's Travels, 1941. McCREA starred as John L. Sullivan, a Hollywood director who disguises himself as a drifter to research the real America. What starts as a comedic premise veers into a heartfelt exploration of empathy and privilege, and McCREA's portrayal was the film's anchor. He managed to be wryly humorous while unveiling layers of sincerity, a reflection of his skill in balancing comedy with genuine emotion. Audiences saw him neither as a hammy comedic actor nor as an aloof leading man, but as someone genuine, exuding warmth even in comedic chaos. Yet McCREA's versatility didn't end with comedic escapades. In Alfred Hitchcock's Foreign Correspondent, 1940, he played a journalist plunged into a world of espionage, delivering just the right mix of curiosity and bravery. The role demanded a sharper tension than his comedic outings, underscoring that behind the amiable grin lay real dramatic muscle. This dual identity, equal parts comedic gentle giant and action-oriented hero, became McCREA's hallmark. Western fans might claim that's where McCREA truly shone. He had a natural rapport with frontier landscapes, and his Western roles soared beyond formulaic shoot-'em-ups. In films like Ride the High Country, 1962, directed by Sam Peckinpah, McCREA's portrayal of a principled ex-lawman was laced with nuance. Aging out of a changing West, grappling with disillusionment, yet clinging to old moral codes. He shared the screen with Randolph Scott, another revered Western icon, creating a layered depiction of loyalty, regret, and fleeting heroism in a land that no longer revered the old ways. The part was undeniably McCREA's spiritual home, bridging integrity and worn-down experience. One secret to Joel McCREA's longevity was his personal contentment with being a steady, reliable presence rather than a showy superstar. He famously turned down roles he felt misaligned with his moral or creative compass, preferring to keep a ranch in real life, far from Hollywood's high drama. While others clamored for top billing and flamboyant contracts, McCREA's more measured approach shaped an enduring brand of authenticity. Number 3, MIRIAM Hopkins. MIRIAM Hopkins, a name you seldom hear in casual film buff conversations, once held a place near the top of Hollywood's early talkie era. She personified a spunky charm and rebellious energy that lit up the screen, even alongside the biggest luminaries of her day. Born in Savannah, Georgia, Hopkins arrived on Broadway in the late 1920s, just in time for the film industry's transition to sound. Her quick wit and stage-honed confidence offered exactly what studios sought, as silent icons struggled with microphones and stilted dialogue. The moment that catapulted Hopkins to stardom was her role in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, 1931. She played Ivy Pearson, a woman unwittingly drawn into the violent orbit of Mr. Hyde. Not only did the film push pre-code boundaries, featuring risque scenes and deeper psychological undercurrents, it showcased Hopkins's ability to merge raw sensuality with genuine vulnerability. That combination made her stand out in a Hollywood still testing the limits of what it could show. Yet comedic prowess might be her true hallmark. In Ernst Lubitsch's Trouble in Paradise, 1932, she inhabited a sparkling comedic vibe, bouncing lines off seasoned co-stars with razor-sharp timing. Audiences were enthralled by how she flitted between comedic whimsy and deeper emotional nuance, bringing a layered approach to the breeziest of roles. However, off-camera drama frequently overshadowed her achievements. Hopkins developed a fierce rivalry with Bette Davis. The two women's animosity was something of a legend, culminating in on-set tensions that threatened entire productions. Fans relished the gossip. Any film co-starring Davis and Hopkins guaranteed fireworks behind the scenes. Their feuds might have boosted ticket sales, but they also overshadowed Hopkins's genuine talent. She found herself tarred by a difficult label, an epithet that, in a studio system heavily reliant on compliance, could capsize a career. Despite those challenges, Hopkins showcased longevity through the 1930s and into the 1940s. She pivoted to roles that demanded a more mature aura, revealing that her comedic charm wasn't her only asset. In Old Acquaintance, 1943, she squared off against Bette Davis in a drama about two writers grappling with friendship and jealousy, mirroring real tension between them. Hopkins's portrayal boasted layered vulnerability, tempered by the comedic reflexes she never lost. Number 4. Robert Montgomery. Robert Montgomery often hovers just outside the main spotlight when we talk about Hollywood legends, yet his career trajectory and sheer versatility deserve a far greater nod. Born Henry Montgomery Jr. in Beacon, New York, he didn't set out to become a movie star. In fact, he drifted through various odd jobs following his father's death before stumbling onto the stage, where talent scouts recognized an unmistakable spark. By the late 1920s, he was bound for California, signing with MGM. His early roles typically cast him as a charming, carefree suitor. From musicals to light comedies, Montgomery's casual grace and boyish smile made him a reliable romantic lead, but he yearned for meatier roles. That ambition led him to Night Must Fall, 1937, in which he played Danny, a murderous psychopath who insinuates himself into the life of a lonely spinster. The film's tension soared as Montgomery embodied a chilling duality, outwardly affable, inwardly sinister. This portrayal earned him an Oscar nomination and shattered any illusions that he was just another pretty face in tuxedos. Montgomery's skill went beyond acting. World War II intervened, and he enlisted in the U.S. Navy, eventually serving aboard destroyers in both the Atlantic and Pacific. This real-life experience hardened him, giving him a depth that influenced his post-war roles and perhaps shaped his directorial perspective. After returning, he delved into more serious, reflective projects, including producing and directing. In They Were Expendable, 1945, directed by John Ford, Montgomery's cameo as a PT boat captain resonated with authenticity, no doubt infused by his own wartime service. His directorial debut, Lady in the Lake, 1947, remains notable for its first-person cinematography, an experimental approach where the camera shows everything from the protagonist's viewpoint. Audiences and critics were split. Some found it immersive, others found it gimmicky. But it proved that Montgomery wasn't content to rest on acting laurels. He wanted to push boundaries and claim creative control. Still, the path wasn't all triumphant. The shifting tides of the 1950s saw the decline of many Golden Age stars. Montgomery tried balancing between small screen and silver screen, hosting the TV anthology series Robert Montgomery Presents, which ironically overshadowed some of his film efforts in the public eye. Despite quality performances in later films, his star never quite regained the same cinematic glow of the late 30s and early 40s. Number 5, Barbara Stanwyck. Barbara Stanwyck might at first seem like a strange addition to a list of underrated actors. After all, her name still circulates in film buff circles, and she commanded a certain measure of Hollywood respect. But ask casual fans to rank Golden Age sirens, and you might hear about Bette Davis, Katharine Hepburn, Joan Crawford, with Stanwyck sometimes only an afterthought. This oversight is surprising given she was equally adept in drama, comedy, westerns, and perhaps most memorably, film noir. Born Ruby Stevens in Brooklyn, Stanwyck endured a difficult childhood. Her mother died when she was young, and her father abandoned the family. That tumultuous upbringing forged a resilience that bled into her on-screen roles, tough but tender, direct but layered. She'd become a chorus girl at 15, eventually breaking into small theater parts. Hollywood took notice in the late 1920s, though sound pictures were about to dominate. She adapted quickly, sporting that husky voice that lent authority to even her simplest lines. One of Stanwyck's early breakthroughs was Stella Dallas, 1937, where she portrayed a mother who sacrifices everything for her daughter's social advancement. Her raw sincerity in the role earned an Oscar nomination. Yet it was only a taste of what Stanwyck could do. From the comedic con artist in The Lady Eve, 1941, to the manipulative seductress in Double Indemnity, 1944, she displayed an unmatched range. In Double Indemnity especially, Stanwyck redefined the femme fatale, weaving cunning manipulation with fleeting humanity, mesmerizing, even though her character was morally reprehensible. That iconic blonde wig, the ankle strap heels, the crisp dialogue with Fred McMurray, these elements collectively birthed a noir classic, showcasing Stanwyck's mastery of tension. Beyond film noir, Stanwyck also thrived in Western settings, not shying away from rugged physical tasks. Later in her career, she transitioned to television, anchoring The Big Valley as Victoria Barkley, an iron-willed matriarch with unwavering moral courage. Some critics argue that Stanwyck's variety might have ironically diluted her brand. She wasn't pinned down by a single persona like Marilyn Monroe or a single genre like John Wayne. Instead, she challenged the system by tackling a wide swath of roles. Audiences came to respect her reliability, but perhaps never coalesced around an iconic Stanwyck persona. Number 6, John Garfield. John Garfield stands out as a pioneer who redefined how raw and authentic acting could be during the studio era. Born Jacob Julius Garfinkel in 1913, he grew up in the tough neighborhoods of New York City, forging a survival instinct that later fueled his on-screen magnetism. He gravitated to the theater, joining the revolutionary group theater in the 1930s, where he encountered a cutting-edge approach that prioritized realism and emotional honesty. This background set him apart from polished peers, groomed by the studio system. Hollywood discovered Garfield in Four Daughters, 1938, where his smoldering persona and emotive eyes stole scenes, earning him an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actor. Suddenly, the major studios realized they had a different breed of leading man on their hands, gritty, urban, and unabashedly streetwise. Garfield's roles often examined class conflict or moral dilemmas, positioning him as an everyman hero, someone audiences from working-class backgrounds could see themselves in. He refused the typical route of polite romantic leads, opting instead for psychologically complex characters caught in the crossfire of social pressures. A peak moment came with The Postman Always Rings Twice, 1946, where Garfield starred opposite Lana Turner. His portrayal of Frank Chambers, a drifter roped into a deadly affair, exuded a simmering tension that revitalized the film noir genre. Rather than playing Frank as a simple victim of lust, Garfield imbued the role with a sense of desperation born from a life of dead-end jobs and broken dreams. Critics hailed him for injecting real vulnerability into the archetypal noir anti-hero. Yet Garfield's ascending star soon collided with a storm. The House Un-American Activities Committee, HUAC, As McCarthyism gripped the nation, Garfield became a prime target. He staunchly refused to name alleged communists within Hollywood, an act of integrity that made him anathema in an industry terrified of blacklisting. The stress weighed heavily. Garfield found many doors slamming shut, his projects canceled or roles withdrawn. Rumors circulated that he was persona non grata among powerful producers anxious to avoid controversy. In 1952, at the age of just 39, Garfield died of a heart attack. Many close friends believed the blacklisting ordeal and constant stress contributed to his early demise. His funeral saw crowds of admirers, ordinary folks who identified with Garfield's underdog spirit, lining the streets. Over time, Garfield's name faded from mainstream mention, overshadowed by the tragedy of James Dean or the public persona of Marlon Brando. But Garfield's influence was no less crucial. He carved a pathway for the method style to infiltrate Hollywood, predating Brando's revolutionary shift by a full decade. Actors like Montgomery Clift, Marlon Brando, and James Dean inherited Garfield's legacy of raw, unpolished intensity. Number 7. Edward G. Robinson. Edward G. Robinson might not have possessed the classic matinee idol looks or the sky-high stature of other leading men, but what he did have was a presence so magnetic that it elevated every project he touched. Born Emanuel Goldenberg in Bucharest, Romania, in 1893, he moved to New York with his family at age 10. The Lower East Side taught him the hustle necessary for survival, an essence that later found its way into his iconic characters. After training for the stage, Robinson soon caught the film industry's eye in the late 1920s. The 1931 gangster film Little Caesar launched him into stardom, forever branding him as the quintessential crime lord of Hollywood's pre-code era. His portrayal of Caesar Enrico Bandello was brash, ruthless, and cunning, yet remarkably layered with a streak of tragic insecurity. At a time when gangster flicks were pumping adrenaline into American cinema, Robinson gave audiences a villain whose desperation for status was as gripping as any moral hero's journey. Not surprisingly, Little Caesar soared to success, cementing both the gangster genre and Robinson's star image. Yet to pigeonhole him as just a gangster star sells him short. Through the 1930s and 40s, he tackled a diverse array of roles, from the cunning insurance investigator Barton Keyes in Billy Wilder's Double Indemnity, 1944, to comedic parts showcasing surprising warmth. In Double Indemnity, overshadowed by Fred McMurray and Barbara Stanwyck, Robinson served as the film's moral anchor, meticulously piecing together a murder plot. His deft blend of intellectual rigor and paternal concern for McMurray's character made Keyes arguably the film's emotional core. Indeed, critics often hail that performance as the prime example of how a supporting role can overshadow the leads in sheer impact. Off-screen, Robinson was known for his refined interests, collecting art, supporting philanthropic causes, and championing progressive politics. That last aspect proved perilous when the HUAC mania swept Hollywood in the late 1940s and early 1950s. Though never blacklisted outright, he found himself grilled by committees and forced to make clarifications about alleged communist sympathies. The ordeal tarnished his standing in certain studio circles, limiting the roles extended to him. Still, he soldiered on, showcasing unwavering professionalism even when personal frustrations must have been immense. As the golden age waned, Robinson continued to find work, though often in secondary roles. Films like Key Largo, 1948, pitted him against Humphrey Bogart, reaffirming that his gangster persona still had bite. Even as the macho style of new actors came to the fore, he never lost that intangible spark, a short man physically, yet towering in gravitas. Late in his career, he appeared in Soylent Green, 1973, showing that even in science fiction, his gravity and authenticity could guide an entire cast. Number 8, Dana Andrews. Dana Andrews epitomized the quiet intensity that set him apart from Hollywood's more showy leading men. Born Carver Dana Andrews in Mississippi, 1909, he relocated to California with dreams that initially centered on music. He sang in church choirs and once toyed with the idea of becoming a professional vocalist. However, economic realities nudged him toward odd jobs, from pumping gas to working at an aircraft factory. When Hollywood talent scouts spotted his striking features and stoic charm, his path took a decisive turn. After signing with Goldwyn Pictures, Andrews landed supporting parts, gradually sharpening his craft. His breakout arrived with Laura, 1944, a film noir masterpiece directed by Otto Preminger. Cast as Detective Mark McPherson, Andrews embodied a taciturn investigator who becomes enthralled by the portrait of the presumed dead Laura Jean Tierney. Audiences were captivated by the understated longing he projected. He never erupted in grand theatrics. Instead, with a calm gaze and a subtle shift of posture, he conveyed deep obsession and romantic despair. That performance solidified Andrews as an actor who could handle the slow burn of noir, delivering tension and subtext with minimal fuss. He followed this success with roles in State Fair, 1945, revealing a folksier side, then pivoted seamlessly to the post-war drama The Best Years of Our Lives, 1946. In that film, he played Fred Derry, a returning World War II veteran grappling with the difficulties of re-entry into civilian life. Andrews earned critical acclaim for depicting the character's inner battles, PTSD, joblessness, marital estrangement, resonating with a generation coping with real-life war aftershocks. Critics and audiences lauded him as an emblem of the era's angst, a man scarred by conflict, yet striving for normalcy. Despite these accomplishments, Andrews often got overshadowed by more flamboyant personalities. He rarely chased tabloid headlines or cultivated an eccentric persona, preferring a quiet personal life that tabloids found comparatively dull. This low-key profile might have limited the mythology that often helps star reputations endure. By the 1950s, as film noir receded and new styles emerged, Andrews wrestled with occasional typecasting. Some roles began to blur, and the unstoppable wave of younger, edgier actors, like Marlon Brando or James Dean, also reconfigured Hollywood's standards for male leads. He didn't vanish entirely, though. Movies like While the City Sleeps, 1956, showcased that unwavering sense of moral grit, even if the film was labeled a B-level production. Over time, historians and noir aficionados singled him out as an essential figure in mid-century American cinema. The quiet magnetism he radiated in Laura and The Best Years of Our Lives alone would be enough to cement his legacy, but he offered more, a steadfast sense of normalcy, a reassuring calm that balanced the melodrama swirling around him. Number 9, Lizabeth Scott. The smoky husk of her voice, the cool aloofness of her gaze. Lizabeth Scott carved out a niche as one of film noir's premier femme fatales, even if she never achieved the top-tier stardom of a Lauren Bacall or Rita Hayworth. Born Emma Matzo in Scranton, Pennsylvania, 1922, she adopted the stage name Lizabeth Scott while modeling in New York. Hal Wallace discovered her potential and brought her to Hollywood, where Paramount groomed her as the threat to Barbara Stanwyck's established noir reign. Though the press might have amplified that rivalry for headlines, Scott's unique brand of simmering tension was undeniable. Her debut in You Came Along, 1945, only scratched the surface of her capabilities. Critics initially pegged her as the threat, referencing Stanwyck's success, but it was in Dead Reckoning, 1947, opposite Humphrey Bogart, that Lizabeth Scott sealed her fate as a noir mainstay. Her portrayal of Coral Chandler was drenched in moral ambiguity. She drew from a wellspring of hushed intensity, letting glimpses of fear and longing flicker across her face before she fell back behind a hardened exterior. Audiences found it impossible to decide if they should root for or condemn her character, which was precisely the appeal of a first-rate femme fatale. Scott's signature style combined wide-eyed innocence with a cunning sense of self-preservation. In Pitfall, 1948, playing Mona Stevens, she stepped out of the straightforward vamp mold to portray a woman trapped by circumstance rather than pure malevolence. That complexity resonated deeply, showing viewers that she wasn't just a one-note seductress. Instead, Scott was capable of forging sympathetic anti-heroines forced to navigate the grim labyrinth of post-war America. However, behind the scenes, her career faced impediments. Rumors circulated about possible underworld connections, tabloid whispers of scandalous personal relationships, and studio politics that sometimes labeled her as difficult. In truth, the real problem might have been that she aimed to break free from typecasting. The industry, locked into the notion of her as the husk-voiced femme fatale, rarely offered comedic or lighter roles. And so, though she continued working steadily, major stardom eluded her. By the mid-1950s, as noir fell out of mainstream favor, her opportunities thinned out. Unlike some peers who clung to diminishing studio contracts, Scott took a practical approach, diversifying her income through real estate ventures. She did sporadic TV appearances, but mostly stepped away from the limelight. Later in life, she gave minimal interviews, living in relative privacy. This quiet exit might explain why her name seldom appears in retrospective celebrations, overshadowed by more flamboyant starlets with massive publicity machines behind them. Number 10. Gladys Cooper. Gladys Cooper may not spark instant recognition among casual classic film fans, yet her resume spans the silent era, stage triumphs in London's West End, and a robust Hollywood phase that blossomed well into her later years. Born in Lewisham, England in 1888, she began her career as a teenager on the British stage, swiftly earning acclaim for a dignified elegance that would remain her trademark. During the World War I, Cooper established herself as a leading lady in British theater, but her transition to film wasn't immediate. Only in the 1930s did she cross the Atlantic, drawn by Hollywood's siren call for more refined, aristocratic types. While younger starlets chased romantic leads, Cooper often embodied formidable aunts, cold mothers, or matriarchs who commanded every scene. Her regal bearing and crisp diction lent an old-world credibility that producers found indispensable when a script needed gravitas. One of her seminal Hollywood roles came in Now, Voyager, 1942, where she portrayed Bette Davis's domineering, soul-crushing mother. As Mrs. Henry Wendell Vale, Cooper was all clipped speech and rigid posture, exuding an almost terrifying control. It was a performance that snagged her an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actress. In lesser hands, such a role might have read as one-dimensional cruelty, but Cooper injected a flicker of maternal pain beneath the tyranny, suggesting that this mother's stranglehold on her daughter was partly shaped by fear and disappointment in life. Bette Davis later praised Cooper for elevating their confrontational scenes to an almost Shakespearean level of intensity. As the 1940s rolled into the 50s, Cooper found herself in constant demand for similarly authoritative roles, governesses, nuns, and occasionally wise confidants. But she wasn't limited to stuffy discipline. On the stage, she continued to show comedic flair, impressing audiences with her wry humor. Her layered approach allowed her to pivot seamlessly between biting cynicism and surprising warmth. This dual capacity meant she was never truly out of work. When film roles dwindled, Cooper thrived on television, making memorable appearances in episodes of The Twilight Zone, most notably Nothing in the Dark, where she confronted the concept of death personified by a young Robert Redford. Part of Gladys Cooper's underrated status in modern memory might stem from the fact that her Hollywood trajectory peaked in supporting parts rather than flashy leads. Audiences recognized her face. Indeed, she graced an astonishing number of films, but might have struggled to recall her name. Even so, she often stole scenes from better-known co-stars through a quiet but commanding presence. Directors discovered that if a film demanded a strong moral or emotional anchor, bringing in Cooper guaranteed an injection of depth. She effectively cornered the market on morally complex older women, a niche that ironically kept her from the marquee, but ensured her longevity. In her later years, Cooper never lost the regal composure that defined her. She balanced film, stage, and radio commitments, representing a class of performers seldom seen anymore, those who wove seamlessly through multiple mediums with unflinching professionalism. Though she departed this world in 1971, her oeuvre stands as a testament to resilience and adaptability. For those venturing beyond the more obvious star vehicles of Golden Age Hollywood, discovering Gladys Cooper can be an eye-opener, revealing an actress who, even without top billing, shaped the emotional contours of every production she graced. Those were 10 deeply talented actors who never quite snagged the spotlight they deserved. If you found yourself inspired by their stories, don't miss out on exploring more hidden gems. We've got plenty in store. So, remember to hit that like button, leave your thoughts in the comments, subscribe to our channel, and consider sharing this video with friends who also love a good Hollywood mystery. Thanks for watching. See you next time.